What if I told you that there's a place on Earth where the sun hasn't risen in over 70 years, where an entire population simply vanished, leaving behind only their clothes, their homes, and a mystery so disturbing that governments have classified all records related to it? Today, we're diving into one of the most chilling disappearances in modern history, the case of Sombraluna, a remote village in the Carpathian Mountains that experienced something so impossible, so terrifying, that those who investigate it are sworn to secrecy. Before we begin, I need to warn you, what you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about reality. The evidence I'm presenting comes from leaked government documents, testimonies from the sole survivor, and my own investigation into this forbidden case. If you're easily disturbed, you might want to click away now, but if you're ready to descend into one of history's darkest mysteries, then stay with me as we uncover the truth about the village that woke up without shadows. On the morning of October 13th, 1952, the 347 residents of Sombraluna woke up to discover something impossible. None of them cast shadows. Not a single person, animal, or object in the entire village produced even the faintest silhouette on the ground, but that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that the sun never rose that morning, yet somehow everything was perfectly illuminated by a visceral, cold light that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere at once. Maria, the village baker, was the first to notice. She stepped outside her cottage at dawn to begin her daily routine of feeding the chickens. When she looked down and saw nothing, no shadows stretched across the cobblestones beneath her feet. Confused, she raised her hand above her head, waved it frantically. Nothing. She ran to her husband Victor, who was still lying in bed, and began shaking him violently. "Victor, Victor, wake up. Something is wrong with the light." She screamed, but Victor groaned and rolled over, annoyed at being woken before sunrise. "Maria, what are you talking about? It's still dark outside." "No, it's not. Come look." Victor stumbled to the window and froze. The village was bathed in a strange, ethereal glow that made everything visible, yet cast no shadows. The light had no warmth, no direction, no source. It simply existed, wrapping around every surface like a living thing. Within minutes, the entire village was awake and gathering in the central square. 347 people stood beneath this impossible light, each one staring at the ground where their shadows should have been. Children began to cry. The elderly crossed themselves and muttered prayers in the old language. The younger men tried to rationalize it, suggesting it was some kind of atmospheric phenomenon, perhaps caused by the nearby mining operations. But then Father Dimitri, the village priest, pointed toward the eastern horizon where the sun should have been rising. The sky was neither dark nor light, but a sickly gray color that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. And in that moment, they realized the horrible truth. The sun was gone. What happened next defies all logic and reason. According to Maria, the only survivor whose testimony we have, the villagers began to change. Not physically, at least not at first, but psychologically, spiritually, they started to deteriorate in ways that she struggled to describe even decades later. It was like watching people forget how to be human. She would tell investigators years later, her voice barely above a whisper. They forgot how to speak, how to eat, how to love. They just stood there, staring at the places where their shadows should have been. By the third day, the children had stopped crying. By the fifth day, people had stopped talking altogether. They would stand motionless for hours, sometimes days, staring at the ground with expressions of profound loss, as if mourning the death of something essential to their very existence. Maria tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She continued baking bread, though no one ate it. She tended to the animals, though they too had become listless and strange. The chickens no longer laid eggs. The cows stopped giving milk. Even the village dogs had fallen silent, lying motionless in the streets with their eyes fixed on the shadowless ground. But it was on the 9th day that Maria witnessed something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She was walking past the Petrov household when she heard a sound she hadn't heard in days. Laughter, high, musical laughter coming from inside the house. She knocked on the door, calling out to Svetlana Petrov, a young mother with twin daughters. The laughter stopped. Maria pushed open the door and found Svetlana sitting at her kitchen table with her twins, Anya and Katya, who were only 4 years old, but something was wrong. The three of them were perfectly still, frozen in mid-motion, as if they were statues. Svetlana had been combing Anya's hair, the brush suspended inches from the child's head. Katya was reaching for a piece of bread, her small hand hovering over the plate, and they were all smiling. The most beautiful, serene smiles Maria had ever seen. "Svetlana," Maria whispered. "Svetlana, can you hear me?" But none of them moved. Their eyes were open, bright and aware, but they remained frozen in that perfect moment of domestic bliss. Maria reached out to touch Svetlana's shoulder, and her hand passed right through her, as if she were made of light itself. That's when Maria understood. The villagers weren't just losing their shadows. They were becoming shadows. Or rather, they were becoming something else entirely, something that existed in the spaces between light and darkness. In the realm where shadows are born, over the next few days, Maria watched helplessly as, one by one, the villagers began to fade. Not disappear exactly, but become translucent, ethereal. Like wisps of smoke caught in the strange, sourceless light that continued to illuminate their shadowless world. They would stand or sit in their homes, frozen in whatever activity they had been doing when the change took them, wearing those same peaceful, terrible smiles. Maria was the only one who remained solid, corporeal, real, and she couldn't understand why. She tried everything, standing in the same spots where others had faded, mimicking their postures, even begging whatever force was taking them to take her too. But she remained stubbornly, painfully human. By the 20th day, Maria was alone. 346 translucent figures populated her village, all of them frozen in moments of ordinary life, all of them smiling that beautiful, haunting smile. She could see them, but she couldn't touch them, couldn't speak to them, couldn't join them in whatever peaceful realm they had found. And still, the sun never rose. The strange light continued to bathe everything in its cold, shadowless glow. Maria survived by eating the stored food from abandoned homes and drinking from the village well. She tried to leave, to walk to the neighboring town of Brasov to get helped, but discovered that she couldn't. Every time she reached the edge of the village, she would find herself back in the central square, as if the very space around Sombraluna had become twisted and impossible. She was trapped in a world without shadows, surrounded by the transparent ghosts of everyone she had ever known and loved. For 57 days, Maria lived this nightmare. 57 days of perfect, terrible isolation in a village that existed somewhere between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. She spoke to the translucent figures, begged them to respond, to give her some sign that they could hear her, but they remained frozen in their eternal moments of happiness. And then, on the 58th day, something even stranger happened. Maria woke up in a hospital bed in Brasov, with no memory of how she had gotten there. The doctors said she had been found wandering the mountain roads, dehydrated and suffering from severe psychological trauma. When she tried to tell them about Sombraluna, about the missing son and the shadowless village, they exchanged worried glances and sedated her. Over the following weeks, as Maria recovered, she began to doubt her own memories. The doctors assured her that she had been the victim of a severe psychotic episode, brought on by carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty heating system in her cottage. They showed her medical records, psychological evaluations, all documenting her gradual descent into madness over the course of 2 months. But Maria knew what she had experienced was real. And when she was finally discharged from the hospital, she made the journey back to where Sombraluna should have been. She found nothing. No village, no houses, no roads leading to it. Even the topography of the land seemed different, as if the entire area had been reshaped. The only evidence that Sombraluna had ever existed was a small stone marker, weathered and ancient, bearing an inscription in the old Carpathian dialect. Here dwelt those who loved the light too much to cast shadows. Maria spent the rest of her life trying to convince people that Sombraluna had been real, that 346 people hadn't simply vanished into thin air. She contacted government agencies, historians, paranormal investigators. Most dismissed her as a traumatized woman suffering from elaborate delusions. But some believed her, and those believers began their own investigations, uncovering disturbing evidence that suggested Maria's story might be more than just the ravings of a damaged mind. In the Romanian state archives, researchers found records dating back to the 18th century that mentioned a village called Sombraluna, known for its unusual number of albino births and reports of light sickness among the population. Local folklore spoke of the village's strange relationship with shadows, claiming they worshipped an entity known as the shadowless sun, a god of pure light that demanded its followers sacrifice their shadows in exchange for eternal happiness. Even more disturbing were the medical records from nearby towns, documenting dozens of cases of shadow anxiety among people who claimed to have visited or traded with Sombraluna in the years before its supposed disappearance. Patients reported nightmares about losing their shadows, obsessive behavior involving light sources, and an overwhelming fear of darkness. But perhaps the most chilling evidence came from satellite imagery. Government weather satellites from the 1950s had recorded an anomalous light source in the Carpathian Mountains that appeared on October 13, 1952, the exact date Maria claimed the sun stopped rising over. The light source persisted for exactly 58 days before disappearing without explanation. The official explanation was equipment malfunction, but unofficial sources within the meteorological department reported that the light source had exhibited characteristics unlike anything they had ever seen. It generated no heat signature, cast no discernible shadows on surrounding terrain, and seemed to exist in a space that satellite imagery couldn't properly map. In 1973, a team of paranormal researchers attempted to locate the site where Sombraluna had allegedly stood. They used Maria's detailed descriptions and historical records to narrow down the search area. What they found defied explanation. In the center of an unremarkable meadow, their instruments detected a circular area approximately half a mile in diameter where the laws of physics seemed to operate differently. Shadows cast by objects placed within this circle appeared distorted, sometimes vanishing entirely. Compasses spun wildly. Electronic equipment malfunctioned in ways that suggested the presence of an unknown energy source. But most disturbing of all were the photographs. Every camera that took pictures within the circle captured the same thing: translucent human figures standing throughout the meadow, frozen in various poses of daily life. The figures were visible only in photographs. They couldn't be seen with the naked eye, and in every single image, all of the figures were smiling. The research team immediately sealed off the area and classified their findings. To this day, the meadow where Sombraluna allegedly stood remains under government surveillance. Officially designated as a geological research site, but actually monitored 24 hours a day by a rotating team of specialists. Maria died in 1989, still insisting that her story was true, still claiming that somewhere in the space between light and shadow, 346 people existed in a state of perfect, eternal happiness. Her final words, according to the nurse who attended her death, were, "I can see them again. They're still smiling. They're still waiting for the sun." But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. In 2003, digital analysis of the photographs taken by the 1973 research team revealed something that had been missed in the original investigation. Hidden among the translucent figures in the meadow was an additional person, a solid, corporeal woman standing at the edge of the circle, looking directly at the camera with an expression of profound sadness. The woman was Maria Kozlov, but the photographs had been taken 14 years before her death. The case of Sombraluna remains one of the most documented, yet officially denied, paranormal events of the 20th century. Despite overwhelming evidence, government records, satellite imagery, scientific measurements, and dozens of witness testimonies, the official position remains that Maria Kozlov suffered a psychotic break and that no village called Som ever existed. but those who have investigated the case know better. They know that somewhere in the Carpathian Mountains, in a space that exists between reality and nightmare, 346 people continue to exist in a shadowless world, frozen in moments of perfect happiness, waiting for a sun that will never rise. And perhaps most disturbing of all is the growing evidence that Sombraluna wasn't unique. Reports of similar incidents have surfaced from remote locations around the world. Villages that vanish overnight, populations that disappear, leaving behind only clothes, and mysterious light phenomena. The pattern is always the same: a loss of shadows, followed by the gradual fading of the inhabitants into translucent, smiling figures. Government agencies continue to monitor these sites, officially denying their existence, while privately studying the impossible physics that seem to govern these spaces between light and shadow. Some researchers believe that these incidents represent contact with beings from a parallel dimension, creatures of pure light who feed on the shadows of living things. Others suggest that they are evidence of ancient rituals gone wrong, attempts to transcend mortality that instead trap souls in a state of eternal limbo. But whatever the truth behind these disappearances, one thing remains certain: there are places on Earth where the normal rules don't apply, where entire communities can slip through the cracks of reality and disappear into realms of impossible light and endless, haunting smiles. The question isn't whether these places exist; the evidence is overwhelming. The question is how many more villages like Sombraluna are out there, hidden from official records, populated by the translucent ghosts of people who loved the light too much to cast shadows. And if you ever find yourself in a place where your shadow seems a little too faint, where the light feels wrong somehow, remember Maria Kozlov's story? Remember that some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some lights are too dangerous to follow. Because in the end, shadows aren't just the absence of light, they're proof that we exist, solid and real, in a world that makes sense. And without them, we risk fading into something beautiful, eternal, and utterly inhuman. The village of Sombraluna may be gone, but its story serves as a warning. Be careful what you sacrifice in pursuit of perfect light, because once you lose your shadow, you might discover that you've lost yourself as well. If this story has disturbed you as much as it has fascinated you, make sure to subscribe for more investigations into the dark corners of history that governments don't want you to know about. And remember, the truth is often stranger and more terrifying than fiction.